He appeared to be the type of guy that you would want to marry. He was a nice guy. He certainly was a gentleman, and he had a very good heart. I would credit Al Sr. That was really the introduction. He saw something in me. He had worked with me. I think maybe Al Sr. was just trying to say to me, here's another resource. You might want to meet him, Al Jr., just to utilize that resource. Here's somebody who can tell you about their experience in law school. I was, very active and engaged in law school. I would try to bring some diversity to whatever the activity I was engaged in. That was important to me.
I'm a third-generation Sears man. And in 1969, as I'm in lower management with Sears, I see this stalwart-looking, stoic man walking towards the coffee shop with A.M. Prado. A.M. Prado happened to have been the southeastern manager for Sears. All of the Sears Roebucks between Atlanta and Miami, and at that time also in Cuba. He had with him Al Dotson Sr. And he says, come here, Walter, I want you to meet someone. This is in 1969. I had never seen an executive that was black in my life with Sears Roebuck. I knew there was something special about him because A.M. Prado didn't take management very lightly. And what I found out later was that he was actually recruiting Al to move from Detroit to Miami to be a part of his executive staff. That was my first meeting with Al Dotson. There were no other department stores that had black executives. They didn't even have black managers. There were no blacks. Most of the blacks that worked in Sears were doing maintenance work, but a manager in Sears, big deal, big deal.
I met Al Sr. at a Sears store in Cutler Ridge. It was a huge deal that I'm personally very familiar with. I grew up in Salisbury, North Carolina, in a totally segregated community, total segregation in the school system. So moving to South Florida after college and law school to come into contact with the manager of a Sears store, being an African American, was, even at my age then, still a little surprising, still a first. Became acquainted with his family. I met Al Dotson Jr., who I knew he was very young, I guess about 18 or so when I initially met him. I moved to the same community in South Dade where the Dotsons lived. Race was never a consideration when you talked to Al Sr. He made everyone feel excellent. He made you feel comfortable regardless of your race. And I would call him the man. Everybody knew him, everybody loved him.
Al and I and Malcolm, we go way back. Actually, I met Al back in 1976 when we both went into Miami Palmetto Senior High. We were both kind of outsiders. Miami Palmetto Senior High is a very prestigious school, has some of the greatest graduates, a very prestigious neighborhood. I'm a Cuban American, my father was a Cuban immigrant. Al's an African American coming in from another state. So we went to Palmetto and, we stood out a little bit. Having said that, I think it helped establish our bond too. We came into Palmetto Senior High, primarily affluent Jewish school. With each other, we, I think, helped establish bonds throughout the rest of the school. I think by the end of our first year, we were Al and Ron, and it showed how we were able to kind of create bridges between that culture that was Palmetto Senior High School, very, again, affluent culture, and an acceptance of being colorblind, being culture blind, making people understand that really, under the skin, we're all the same.
I credit Al Dotson for going to Dartmouth. I couldn't get anyone into anywhere they get themselves in. But to the extent of my directing him toward there and having him select Dartmouth when he had a bunch of choices, it's because I liked him. I did everything for Al because he was Al. And the same with his father. They were wonderful human beings. They've had to work harder to get whatever they're trying to achieve. When they cross the finish line, at the same time that someone who's had tutors, special classes, everything else, I think the one who had nothing but gets to the finish line equally is better.
My greatest contribution to the Bilzin Sumberg law firm is the fact that I hired Al back in the 80s, and I had the foresight to see that this was a very special human being. Al is a unique human being. He lights up a room when he comes into the room. He is that charismatic. I think Martin Luther King said it best. You don't judge someone by the color of their skin, you judge someone by the quality of the individual. Al has always been one of the exceptional human beings in our firm, and it is truly a tribute to both Al and to the firm that someone from the African American community could rise to the level, and nobody even gave it a second thought. Probably the greatest attribute I can attribute to him, Al is truly his father's son. And that is a major compliment to both the father and the son.
Al Dotson was a bridge builder. He was a bridge builder. He did that on so many fronts. While he's here in Miami, working at Westland, he gets a chance to meet many Cubans. He becomes a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Hialeah. He was able to bring those two groups together, the blacks, the whites, the rednecks, if you don't mind, of the whites, and the Cubans. When Al left and became his own manager of his own company, most of his clients were Jewish. And so now you have this additional layer, and he bridges that gap from his gift of bringing people together.
African Americans and Jewish people have a lot in common. If you look historically, the Jews have faced obstacles all over the world. African Americans have endured a lot. So the fact that both of us have had to overcome trials and tribulations gives us some commonality about the struggle in life. The more that we can come back together and continue to fight the struggle is important. Al is definitely that bridge. You look at his generation, you look at my generation, how far we've come. Al is prepared and in the position to take it to the next level, which is where we need to be. With Al, with Bilzin Sumberg, I always say, oh, you mean a Dotson firm? Because that's the firm I know is affiliated with Al Dotson Jr., who's just an incredible young man. I feel so proud of Al Sr. and Al Jr. I like to refer to Al Jr., as we did in North Carolina, a chip off the old block. And Al Jr. is certainly that.
You know, unfortunately, in today's culture, there just seems to be such a divisiveness. There seems to be me and them. And that's something that is very hard for me to understand. I think we've become oversensitized to accepting each other for who we are, enjoying each other for who we are. You know, Al and I, we can joke with each other. I think in a lot of ways, and I know this is going to make some people uncomfortable, I think we need to learn to have fun again. We need to lighten up. We need to embrace each other's differences and understand that together it makes us all better. That's what Al has done that for over 4 decades. You know, you look, Al is not a guy who is very, loud. He doesn't go out. He's quiet, he's eloquent, and he touches things that make a difference. Al doesn't care about Al. Al cares about the people that Al can help.
I think both Al Jr. and Al Sr. can sell fire to a fire person. Al Jr., I could see him evolving and becoming the person and doing the things that Al Jr. has done, and I could see that there is a direct correlation between Al Sr. and Al Jr. because one thing about Al Sr. is that he commanded attention. There was a certain stature or presence to him, and it's clear that Al Jr. possessed the same qualities. I do think it's very important, Al Jr. being an example, and not just Al Jr., it really should be more Al Juniors in the community.